What's up, everybody? I'm Noah Krachevic, and welcome to another live stream from the Midwestern Marx Institute for Marxist Theory and Political Analysis. Tonight, we have a really cool stream up for y'all. We're going to be talking about the 9/11 that you never hear about, the coup of Salvador Allende, and a really tragic and interesting story to come out of that. The murder of Rodrigo Rojas, who is, the son of communists and fled the Pinochet dictatorship and was later burned alive for protesting. We're going to have a very close friend of the Institute and a personal friend of mine talking to us about this. His name is Fernando from the Communist Party of Proletarian Action in Chile. And you may know him better as the Red Chilean. We're going to do all that right after the new intro.
High Sheriff Hazard is a hard man to be. High Sheriff is his only plan. He digs through pockets, takes what he can, for he's High Sheriff Hazard. He caught me one evening, and here's what he said: "You look like a Russian, you look like a red, and if you're fond of your skin and your head, beware the High Sheriff of Hazard."
Man, that intro is phenomenal.
I'm a fan.
Everything good? Go ahead. What'd you say?
No, just asking if I sound good, if there's any problems.
No, you sound great to me.
That's great. Hello, everybody. How's the chat doing?
I think the chat's doing all right so far. They're all talking about the intro being fire, which they're very correct about. I'm pumped to have you on, brother. This is when you first told me about this story, I was fascinated by it. So I went digging a little on my own because that's what I do. I'm kind of an obsessive weirdo that needs to understand everything right away. But I'm excited to hear you tell the story. But before we get to all that, I know most people probably know who you are. But why don't you, for everybody watching that doesn't yet know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you come from, why, how you got hooked up with us and all that kind of stuff.
No, gladly. Actually, my story actually brings to light a little bit as to why this story, why this man resonates with me so much. So if I may start, at the beginning, well, not quite at the beginning. Hello, everybody. My name is Fernando. Online, I'm known as the Red Chilean. It's a handle I just picked a long time ago when I wanted to make some YouTube videos, only to realize how much work that entails. And it. So I just stuck around on Twitter And long story short, I met Noah and a couple other people, and I ended up helping him out with some stuff. For example, not the intro that we were referencing right now, but the waiting intro, the starting soon one. I made that one. Very happy with it. And I've helped with some other stuff behind the scenes with the team of people that help out in Midwestern Marks, who are all wonderful and very easy to work with and very professional. So to the production team, although I'm not as involved as I once was, you guys have been killing it. Making some great stuff. But returning to myself, and the reason I bring this up will become a little bit more clear as we start talking about Rodrigo. But at the time I didn't appreciate it. I was fortunate enough when I was young. My father got a PhD in UCSB, the University of California, Santa Barbara. So I grew up half of my life in Chile, in Concepcion in the south. Quite a working class town, actually. We have coal mines and steel mills and whatnot. But also, a very petty bourgeois town in other parts. It's a lot of colleges, a lot of campuses. It's an interesting place. Sorry, I got a little sidetracked. But so that was the first part of my childhood, and the rest of my childhood was in Santa Barbara, which is one of the most wealthiest cities in the United States, particularly in the college area. Thank you, Daniel, and thank you, Hank. But growing up there, with the Trump election, I got politically involved. Right, my family comes from a working class background. My uncle was exiled during the dictatorship. He fled to Argentina. And my grandfather was a trade unionist, which implied a ton of headaches when the dictatorship came around. He, however, was lucky to keep his job and whatnot. You were gonna say something?
No, I just said I bet it implied a ton of headaches, right?
Yeah, no,
the dictatorship did not mess around. I don't want to interrupt your story. Sorry, I have a tendency to do that. Go ahead, keep going.
Well, anyways, so yeah, I had that background going up to the States. So growing up there, before I got politically involved, I quite often fought with the teachers, who said, some ignorant stuff. Yeah, I've grown to be a little frustrated with the European tendency of bashing Americans for being ignorant and whatnot, as if they're so much more enlightened. But nevertheless, coming from that kind of background, you butt heads with the narrative that you get that is told by the schools. But anyways, that came to a head when Trump got elected. Me being young and having a certain, being raised in a college environment. You pick up certain social values, right? Very, very progressive in the layman terms of the word. And that urged me to rediscover the history that I had, as quite young. I was raised with that idea of what it means to be left. And, in my weird way, merging it into this new left that I'd grown up with, I became an anarchist. But I never let go of my roots. I never let go of my roots of Allende, of the Cuban Revolution. Even in my most embarrassing times, I never denounced someone like Fidel Castro. For me, he was always a hero, and that's one of the proudest facts about me. That even in my utter confusion, I figured that I knew that one. Actually, before I keep going, an interesting fact about my town. I mentioned there's a coal mine. When the Bay of Pigs invasion was going on, from that coal mine, 200 coal miners volunteered to sign up to the Cuban army to defend the country, because they assumed it was going to be this prolonged, a beach.
Oh, we lost you for a second there, brother. You're back.
I hung.
You cut out completely and left the broadcast, and you.
What was the last thing you
said? You were talking about the Bay of Pigs invasion, and everybody thought it was going to be a prolonged thing.
Everyone thought it would be like what Ukraine is now, that it would be this long war, and the U.S. would get involved, or at least there would be a beachhead and whatnot. It was over in a couple weeks, but under that context, 200 volunteers signed up to go join the struggle. So just another source of pride of my little town.
Absolutely, that's cool.
No, yeah. But anyway, so returning, I was a confused little anarchist, and I decided to return to my country. I was 19 years old, and I joined my party. Did a lot of learning, did a lot of unlearning, and long story short, here's where I am today. The reason I bring that up is because when I first learned about Rodrigo, which was actually quite recently, it was genuinely uncanny how much his story lined up with mine, and I just came to a realization that had I been born in the 60s, I very well could have been this kid. I very well could have ended up dead, just like he did. So it's quite a personal story. So if I get a little teary-eyed, that's why. But it's a painful story, but it's also one of tremendous sacrifice and tremendous inspiration.
I agree. When I started learning about it, I was blown away that, this kid went to America. He could have been safe. He could have just lived out his days here, not worried about it. But something compelled him to go back home. And
I know that feeling all too much.
It's the same thing that I think compels all of us to fight right now.
Yeah.
Right. That you can't just give up. When there's people around you that and you love that are suffering, or even if you don't know them, when there's people around that are suffering, it's just something you can't do. At least for me, I wouldn't be able to call myself a man if I just sat around doing nothing, So, without sort of like, I don't want to break right into it though, because I want to go into first. Let's sort of set the stage. Right. Let's explain exactly what the Allende movement was. And because we were talking about this a little bit before we went live, so your party actually came out of it like self-correcting ex-ultra-lefts, right?
Yeah. So my party was founded in 1979 after a former party, a Maoist party, had dissolved not in the 60s. After the coup happened, the Mao, or the Chinese government would be better said, actually recognized the dictatorship of the military government, which is a whole topic in and of itself that would take one, if not two, streams to properly explain. It's a mess. But suffice it to say, that was a mistake. And that mistake led to this Maoist party just absolutely imploding. And the ashes left from that fire gave rise to my party. And my party published recently, this is not the one, this is the one, a book. This book contains our program. It's called Manifesto. Not very original, but that's not the goal. But
we're doing the same thing, so it's fine.
In the opening chapters, we actually, written by the old heads, the old guard in my party, was written a self-criticism about the positions of what they say was an ultra-left position, that the anti-revisionist camp, for the lack of a better term, criticized the Allende government for being reformist, which was a correct critique. The problem is that just because you have one correct critique doesn't mean you have everything figured out. And the key mistake that camp made was that Allende's program was correct, and more importantly, it was revolutionary. What he proposed would have given Chile, a renewed sovereignty, a renewed independence, and a path to socialism. And in failing to, mistaking strategy for politics, they denounced it wholesale, which, like I said, is a mistake. And this is a mistake that's
let me cut it real quick, because this is what it's interesting that this is a sort of how the purity fetish develops, right? That it deviates from the pre-planned or recipe of building socialism that you have to follow. So therefore, it has to be absolutely denounced and tossed away. What I find really interesting, though, is that they're not the only party doing this. As Allende is coming into power, and the left sort of block that he has, right? There's a few parties doing that, And what's interesting to me is that these days we would say, okay, we could make this critique, but still join this block, right?
Exactly.
And by the way, Reclaim Dasein, you are on like such thin ice, so quiet down or I'm gonna have you banned, buddy. Okay, anyway, sorry. He's been going off for days now. So interestingly, what I was trying to say is that these days we would say, okay, we have our critique, but why would we not join this anyway, right? And try to fight for what we consider the correct position. And I like that sort of your party emerges out of recognizing this failure of the past. But I want to sort of go into like the actual situation on the ground as Allende comes to power, because that's going to set the scene for the rest of the story. So do you want to give us like an overview of that real quick?
Oh, absolutely. So the coup against Allende, among others, like the coup in Iran against Mossadegh, was when the CIA was starting to figure out how to topple anti-imperialist governments, or now they just topple any government they don't like, as evidenced by Bangladesh recently. But the Allende government won on a plurality, not a majority. They had about 37% of the vote, and the rest of the vote was split between two other candidates, one of the far right and one of the center right, which gave a unique condition for that electoral victory. Nevertheless, his plurality was growing, and I'm blanking out how to phrase this. My English is a little rusty, but had the coup not happened, they were approaching what you guys similar to what you guys have called the midterms, right? Where you elect the Congress while the executive stays in power. And the fear of the imperialists was that his growing plurality would manifest in a deepening victory, right? As in they grow their presence in the Congress, legitimizing his mandate. More importantly, also, perhaps not more importantly, but notably, the coup also happened one day before the National Day of Independence, which was to send a message. And there's a lot to talk about there. But yeah, Allende's program was one of industrialization, was one of planting Chile's independence, and substantiating that, right? Like industry is power. When you're a state, if you don't have industry, you don't have power, and it doesn't matter how many declarations and how many positions you take in the international sphere. If you don't have the material capacity to provide for your people and to affect the world, then your independence is just a piece of paper. The ability to turn or to materially create independence is the ability to generate wealth for your country. And this is even outside the bourgeois proletarian contradiction. This is just even a bourgeois country is not independent if it is not industrial. You can take a look at Russia or any other European power. There's a reason Russia can stand up to the US and tell them we're not going with you, even though it's a bourgeois power.
Yeah, I mean that's the sort of decay of finance, right? And the creation of dependent. A lot of people look at sort of the way imperialism works incorrectly, honestly. That there's just governments sending people to take resources. That's not how it works, right? It's creating a dependence on the financial institutions in question, which are supranational or global at this point. But that's Wall Street, right? That's the City of London, that's Brussels, all of these stock exchanges and places like this. The whole key is to create other countries being dependent upon them for influxes of capital or food or whatever else it is. So that the notion of maintaining your own industrial sovereignty is absolutely central to your people's sovereignty, right? That's why we say we aren't a sovereign people in the US anymore, because we've all been forced to rely on debt from these financial institutions. And this is what makes Allende such a brilliant revolutionary leader, that his program would have been establishing these things. And have you noticed, like, despite all the rhetoric of Pinochet and how much growth the market would do, and, you know, Milton Friedman advising him and all this, all it did was create Chile's dependency on Western finance capital, which is
that's
always
notable because Pinochet realized his mistake. He privatized the copper reserves and started having getting it extracted by foreign companies, and his army just became completely insubordinate because their wages just collapsed. So he had to renationalize it. In fact, he had to renationalize all of it. Today, only 32% of Chile's copper is state-owned, and that was actually privatized after the dictatorship by the democratic governments. Democratic.
Well, I see. I didn't even know that one. Well, okay. So what happens to Allende that sort of throws a monkey wrench in the works?
Backtracking briefly, the pillar of this industrialization was going to be the nationalization of copper, which was achieved, as mentioned. Once that was done, you know, the CIA was going to do everything it could to overthrow him, you know. And there's a famous Nixon quote where he said, you know, I want to make the economy scream, which again is a tale all too common. And nowadays everybody, like, you know, if you are a rogue state, you know, the US will try to make your economy scream. But yeah, there was a wholesale embargo. The country couldn't import, it couldn't export, so the economy collapsed, and the basic goods could only be achieved through black markets. And the state took certain measures, but I don't want to get too much into the weeds because those end up being details that, you know, if you want to study how that works, you know, go look at Venezuela or go look at Russia. Russia's doing it at a much bigger scale, or, you know, perhaps even study the BRICS, you know. Those are the measures that the government would have been greatly benefited by, but that was a different time.
But the one thing I want to say before we move past this, though, is that the food situation became so bad that children were literally getting brain damaged from malnutrition.
No, that's you were mistaken. That was actually after the dictatorship. That was during the economic crisis of the military government.
Okay, so I was under the impression that this happened under Pinochet. That's not correct.
No, that happened under Pinochet, but, you know, by then the sanctions were gone. During the Allende years, that's what I'm reflecting upon. The economic collapse happened due to the sanctions.
I jumped the gun on it, I think, is all. My bad. But thank you for the correction. Okay, so let's go past there to Pinochet taking over, because this is like really where we want to get to begin to tell Rodrigo Rojas' story, right? What happens to Allende that you know, where is the coup? Give us like a sort of bullet points version of how the coup takes place.
So the coup starts in the 10th of September, actually, at midnight, you know, right before. Where the Air Force and the military mobilize to overthrow the government. Over the following day, they start bombing the presidential palace, known as La Moneda, the coin, if you were to translate it literally, where the Allende refuses to accept the deal given to him by the military. The military said, "Hey, we'll give you safe passage. You can go, you know, to Cuba or to a neutral country. Just step down." It's dubious if they would have honored that. There's a good chance they would have killed him anyways. Nevertheless, Allende refused to stand down, and he actually gave a final address from La Moneda through its radio communications. It's quite beautiful. I suggest everyone go listen to it. There's a lot of translations.
Let me ask you a quick question. There's the sort of legend of Fidel Castro coming to Chile, telling Allende, you know, the imperialists are coming. You need to arm people, and Allende sort of not taking the advice. Is there any truth
That's
to
true.
that?
That's completely true, and it only further evidences what we were discussing earlier, that the camp that should have been putting that idea forward, like they grabbed this, like, oh, you see Fidel Castro agrees with us, but that was that. They weren't they weren't part of this huge mass movement making that argument, convincing people. Like, had they been, perhaps it would have still failed. But at least once the coup happens, you're better prepared. You convince some people, you get them ready. Since they were organizing in the margin of this movement, they really failed to grab a lot of people. Again, they had some people, like the left revolutionary movement, the MIR, had some success organizing college students, but what percentage of the population is that? And there's, again, another stream for another time, but they have their own particularities that are need to be discussed.
Imagine that Maoists organizing college students, right?
No, I mean, I'll give them their due. They were a lot better organized and a lot more effective than like if you think something like the Red Army faction, just to throw out a name. They were a lot more serious, but if you read their biography, they had their own. They had plenty of clown moments as well.
The New Left was a very strange era.
It was,
especially in the ultra left cliques and the Maoist and Hojist. So okay, so Pinochet's coup goes off, and Allende is killed.
It's quite controversial. I'll give you my position on it, but it's said that they do the last stand, him and an organization lifted up by the MIR. By this time, there had been some corrections about let's call them the ultra left sectors, and the government. They had gotten a little closer, just by need of necessity. MIR had organized what's called the Group of Personal Friends, the GAP in Spanish, who were a series of civilian bodyguards for Allende, they were armed, but they were not part of the military because Allende did not trust the military. Sorry, let me backtrack. That was the reason he didn't trust the military, was because a constitutionalist general who was the maximum authority of the military, except for the president, he was assassinated by the CIA. His name was Carlos Prats. Who he was by no means a communist, but he was like, no, the Constitution says Allende should be the government, should be the president, so we're gonna let him finish his term, and so they killed him. Excuse me, no, not Carlos Prats. That guy was killed later. It was René Schneider, who coincidentally near where I live, there's a neighborhood named after him. But yeah, so he was murdered, and then there was an attempted coup. Known as the Tanquetazo, the tank brigade or whatever, which failed, and it was actually put down by Pinochet. Theories go that it was them testing the water, seeing the responses, seeing who aligned which way, and whatnot. And that was 6 months before the actual coup. But anyways, return to the coup. They were doing their last stand, Allende and the group of personal friends. Until the presidential palace is just thoroughly, destroyed, bombed, burning, and the military goes in there and claims that Allende had killed himself. The response at the time was that it was not true, that they killed him, because the logic is like, well, you're doing your last stand, why would you kill yourself at the last moment? I've looked at the evidence. There's been a lot of autopsies. There's been a lot of investigations. I'm convinced. I think that Allende said, like, they're going to kill me, they're going to torture me to death. I don't want to give them. I don't want them. I don't want to give them the satisfaction of parading my body through the streets, alive, and giving me some show trial. I just, we're just going to end it here. That's my read on it. I'm not confident on it, but that's a lot of speculation.
I think that's something that we don't hear about very often, and it's tragic. Here he is, a democratically elected leader of the entire country, stuck in his office, and his choices are
Yeah, there's a lot of pictures of him with an AK-47 that was given to him by Fidel.
which is pretty cool.
It's pretty cool.
But his choices are like get tortured by this CIA-run coup force or commit suicide, and the guy
Again,
chose.
I don't. You never know how one would react in such a moment. I don't
Right, you
think. I
don't.
think he could have. I think he would have been given house arrest. I don't think he should have done it, but it's a crazy moment, man. Like you were elected president. You're being bombed by your own military. It's
Yeah.
it's a difficult situation to say the least.
I mean, think about just like what's going through your mind about what's happening to your country. Like if I try to put myself in people's shoes like that, I don't know what I would be thinking and doing.
No clue, man.
If everyone around me is killing each other and there's this mass violence going on in that. I mean, wow. It's tragic. It's really tragic.
It escapes explanation, man. Like that's why I say I can believe that he killed himself. He wasn't a military man. The fact that he stood his ground and fought back is incredible in and of itself.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's go into the Pinochet regime for a minute, and let's have the star of our show sort of come on stage right now. Rodrigo Rojas de Negri, right, is his full name.
Rodrigo Rojas de Negri.
Rojas de Negri? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to do.
No, it's no problem.
Dumb Midwestern guy. There's no way I can do a good accent. But so his parents are communists, right?
Yeah, they're communists, and they suck. They see as the coup's happening, communists are getting rounded up. They're being put in concentration camps. Word gets out. A lot of people who were more closely connected to the government seek refuge in the Cuban embassy, the Soviet embassy. I almost said Russian. The Canadian embassy, the Swedish embassy. If you go to Santiago, it's interesting. The embassies in America, you like in the movies that you watch, you get this notion that this embassy is like almost this bunker fortress. If you go to Santiago, most embassies, for most countries, they're just like a house, right? But it's sovereign territory for different countries. So if you make it in there, for a police officer or a military officer to go in there and drag you out, it will be an international scandal. So a lot of people
just technically invading the country.
Yeah. So any given communist, went to the embassy of a country that they figured would be neutral, and they got away with it. And again, tragically, because of China's position, a lot of people went and sought refuge in the Chinese embassy, and they were kicked out. So that dark moment in Chile and Chinese relations.
The Sino-Soviet split alone, it just very, very strange time,
Yeah, very, very tragic time. But putting that aside again, for anyone who's wondering, I am pro-China today, but there's a lot of things that need to be discussed to put it bluntly. Moving on, Rodrigo Rojas was born in 1967, so he was 6 years old when the coup happened, and he gets told by his mother that they're going on vacation, right? And then they run off to a strange house near downtown, where they wait around and excuse me. He gets told that his mom is taking him on vacation, a mom that he hasn't seen in a couple of days. And next thing he knows, they're off to Canada, and he doesn't know when they're going to come back. Well, he had some family in the Washington, D.C. area, so they actually relocate there. Now him realizing that they're not going back, and that they're going to be staying there for a while. But he goes up in the D.C. area, and he goes to the Woodrow Wilson High School. The coincidences. But as he grows up, they tell him what's going on, and he learns, and he's extremely involved in the Chile Solidarity Network movement, which is quite extensive in the U.S. Like Bob Dylan did a show with Phil Oakes raising money for the resistance, which was pretty cool.
Phil Oakes is fantastic, by the way. Yeah. If anyone hasn't heard of Phil Oakes, go check out "Love Me, I'm a Liberal" right now. You will not be disappointed.
Very funny song. But
Actually,
you know,
around that time, it's interesting because he went sort of Maoist,
yeah.
right? So it's interesting that he was so full on in support of Chile and against the coup.
Well, that's a big debate. You know, like the again, I don't want to get too much into the weeds. We could easily
Right.
get lost here. But you know, the Maoist movements of the new left and Maoism in China, for me, they're movements that run in parallel. But to overlap them, you can't really, you know, say like, oh, you know, because one took this position, the other one took that. You know,
Mhm.
the conditions of the West, of the Maoist movements in the West, which were predominantly, you know, petty bourgeois and done by college students. You know, like, you know, a college student's not going to support Pinochet. You know, like
Mhm.
it's that's a step too far, and it's why these movements began to implode around this time.
Yeah, I mean, Maoist movements today have the. It's weird because I look at the Maoist move. The word Maoist sort of meant something different in the New Left era than it means today. Today, it's just sort of like a brand of LARP. But back then, really, all it generally meant was that you sided with the Chinese in the Sino-Soviet split, and that had a tendency to be the younger people that were sort of rebelling against their parents and whoever else that were old guard Soviet people, right? I don't know. We're gonna get off into the weeds. Let's not
We
go
should do
that
a
way.
stream sometime talking about the Sino-Soviet split. It'll be 50 hours long.
Oh, I've had it. You know what's funny? Since we started hanging out with the infrared guys, they super side with China in this, and I've
Yeah, I've talked to a
my
couple of them.
entire life been a Soviet guy, and strictly, even with Khrushchev's problems, side with Khrushchev and the Soviets during this era. So we've had some very interesting discussions on it. I think it would be more than 30 hours long.
To finish this topic, you know, if anyone's interested, I think that the best position was given by Ludo Martens, who was part of the
Mm.
Belgian Communist Party. He took a neutral stance and gave some pretty tough criticisms to both sides. Look up his review. I forget the exact title of the text, but he did a conclusion basically after the Berlin Wall fell, saying, you know, now with hindsight, we can look at the Sino-Soviet split and say, you know, the Soviets got this wrong, the Chinese got this wrong, the Soviets got this right, the Chinese got this right. And just to finish with this, I as far as I can tell, that's the position that North Korea and Cuba took, which I think, you know, is no mistake that those are the two countries that survived the fall.
That's a really good point. Well, I mean, China sort of comes out on top, but China's gigantic. But Ludo Martens, I think the only thing I've ever read from him is his Stalin book, right? But he's a brilliant guy. I'm gonna check that out after we're done. So, but let's get back to Chile though, because I don't want to stray too far off topic. I know I have a tendency to ramble, so
No, it's no
feel
problem.
free to
But anyways,
rein me in if you need to, brother. So as the communists are fleeing, running into the embassies, and those who can't escape are getting rounded up, tortured, put into the concentration camps, taken
I mean,
to
a lot of them
the
were
football
killed just
stadium to
right.
be tortured, right?
A lot of them were killed on the spot. My general secretary had a close encounter where shortly after the coup, they went to his neighborhood and, you know, they rounded him up, drove him around a bit. He said he wasn't beaten, which, you know, he got lucky. And then what they would do is that you'd get off the truck and they'd be like, all right, make a run for it. Right. And you didn't know if as soon as you turned your back, they would shoot you in the back. Right. A lot of people got killed like that. You know, and I'm sure a lot of people know this story, but there's a very famous folk singer, Victor Jara, who came to be one of the faces of the government. He really embodied the movement, and he was killed in a particularly gruesome way because after they rounded him up and put him in the concentration camp, he would try to cheer up the people there, and they would start singing and protesting, doing hunger strikes and whatnot. And he was a source of resilience and motivation for a lot of people.
Definitely.
So yeah. So eventually, they broke his hand so that he would drum on the steel bars or on the floor. They broke his hand so he couldn't do that. They broke his jaw so he couldn't sing. And eventually they killed him, and they hung his body outside of the National Stadium, which is obviously a big structure in downtown Santiago, the capital. Putting out a message like, "Hey, this is your guy," right? But returning to Rojas, he was deeply involved in the Chile Solidarity movement. He would I read in his biography that he would help organize rallies and whatever he was in all the groups that a young communist in the 70s and 80s was involved in. He grows up, and in high school he becomes quite a talented photographer. And if you look at his limited catalog, since he died so young, it's quite beautiful. He had an eye for good composition and good images. And now when he turns 19, after he graduates, he makes a decision to visit Chile. It's unclear to me if he was gonna stay there, or if he was just looking to visit and then come back. And it's equally unclear to me, though I have a suspicion, if he was an American citizen by this point. But
by the way, here's some of his work right here that I just have pulled up. He really, this is South Port. He really was a really good photographer. I mean,
he was great.
Sorry, I just wanted people to be able to see that. That's really cool. Okay, go on with your story. Sorry to interrupt.
So after when he gets to Chile, he doesn't make it long. Because of his upbringing, growing up in America, Americans have a very particular way of interfacing with police. Police in America they're quite rude and quite arbitrary, to put it like that. When I first got there, I remember my dad, being explained to him like, "Hey man, if you get pulled over, don't move. Keep your hands on the steering wheel and whatnot. If you get pulled over in my country, you can get down and explain to the cop, and you discuss it, and he'll be very professional, and with like he has a stick up his ass, but you're not worried about getting shot, right?
Right.
But that breeds a certain culture, a way of talking to the police, and obviously a certain attitude towards the police, which Rojas definitely shared. But also like the fact that he was a foreigner, the fact that I believe he had he was an American citizen, because it's described that during his brief stint there, when he went to protest, he was quite brave, perhaps even foolish and brazen. And he was a photographer. He would photograph the cops beating the shit out of people. He would photograph the protesters, and they would tell him, "Hey man, you can't walk around with a camera. They're gonna grab you." Mm-hmm. But he disregarded that. So there was a big protest planned for July 2nd. This is in 1986. He had been in the country for about a week, where he once again comes out with his camera, starts recording people and whatnot. And the military police grab him, and another girl, her name Carmen Quintana, and they drive him around. And
so
here's where
give me a sec before we get to this. I'm sorry, brother. What makes him want like? Is there a specific point? Because I know it's like as he's sort of becoming a man, he's a very young man at the time, that he decides to go back to Chile. Is there something that happens that makes him go home, or does he just kind of say enough is enough? I need to go back.
There was an uptick of unrest in '86, so this is like midway through '86.
Okay.
It was this uptick, by the way, that ended up toppling the military government.
Yeah, well, and so he goes, "I need to help."
Yeah,
and goes help. Okay,
but also,
okay.
Like, I know how he felt. When I was in the States, both my parents were Chilean. He was in the States. I don't know if his dad was with him, but his mom was Chilean. He was raised with, celebrating the 18th of September, our national independence, eating sopaipillas, empanadas, pastel de choclo. I know what his life was like, even though very little is documented about him. I can picture it. And you miss it. you deeply miss it when you're over there. But it's tragic. He never even got to realize this. But spending so much time, he spent more time in the U.S. than I did. When you come back here, you end up missing America as well. It's a whole thing. But anyway, so because he's at this protest, and they grab him and they put him in a military truck. And here's where we have two testimonies. We have the testimony of the military and the testimony of Carmen. I'll let you decide who you believe. The military says that during the protest, he was throwing a Molotov cocktail, which he accidentally dropped on himself, and it burned him. I would take note that in the hospital where he was registered, it said that 90% of his body was burnt. So how do you got a Molotov cocktail and you drop it on yourself and it coats 90% of your body? I find it doubtful. Carmen says that Carmen also had burns on her body. So were they playing hot potato with a Molotov? Who the fuck knows? Carmen says that the military drove them out to a rural area, took them off the bus, beat the shit out of them, coated them with gasoline, torched them, and left. And they were found in the rural areas outside of Santiago by some farmers. Where once they find them, this is in the early morning of the day after, so July 3rd. They take him to a nearby hospital, where Rodrigo dies three days later. And that's his story. Like I said, it's a short one and it's a bitter one. But like I said, I see a lot of myself in this kid.
I get it. Especially for you, right? It's heartbreaking. He decides to go back and fight, and what does he do to fight? Right? He does what he's good at. He does what he inspires.
He does what he was taught to think is the way to fight that dictatorship. In America, you get this idea of the freedom of expression and the press, and if you see an injustice, you need to denounce it, right? And he does just that, and pays the ultimate price for it.
Yeah, and man, so regarding him as a person. Are there any other sort of interesting quirks that he was too young to develop anything, right? So maybe that's a bad question. So a better question would be that where can people go to learn his story?
There's a mural of him, I know, in Washington D.C. I don't know exactly where. I noticed that on his Wikipedia page. There's a picture of the mural. It's quite beautiful. It's like him as a little boy reaching up to his face. Which is a mosaic made from one of the few pictures we have of him. But I just realized I'm not done telling the story. After he dies, or before he dies, actually, I should say that, which this is surprising. The ambassador to Chile he goes to great efforts to try to move him to a better hospital, which is denied. The military government does not let this happen. And his funeral was attended by thousands of people, among them the ambassador, which I find quite strange because the ambassador would be from Ronald Reagan.
That is strange, right?
Just an oddity. But his funeral erupts into protest when the military government tear gases and I don't know what, but they have these water cannons and the water has some irritants in it, and they go harass a grieving family and a grieving nation.
It shows you how little honor and respect these sort of forces of reaction have, that they can't even allow people to grieve in peace. It's absolutely disgusting. And they act, the similar forces act the same exact way today. It reminds me of a friend of mine, a very, very close friend of mine when I was younger. Her father escaped the Pinochet regime. And he had some sort of minor job in the Allende government, working in I forget what ministry it has to do with finance there, but he was sort
Minister
of
Hacienda.
okay,
The
cool.
Ministry of Hacienda. How do you translate that? I would Google it, but my phone's recording me right now. I can't.
He was an accountant, basically,
Yeah.
right? And he fled here, and I remember sort of. So I was sort of, because of my family, in charge of getting all my friends when we were younger to talk about Lenin and communism and all this. I remember we asked him about it one time, and he was like, if my daughter, my friend, wasn't born, I would probably have gone back. But here we are. And it makes me think of him, easily could have been him. And he was a great guy too, like never would have hurt a fly, never did anything wrong. He was just a good accountant who cared about the cause and wanted to help out in the way he could. And those were the type of people that were being slaughtered en masse by the Pinochet dictatorship. And this isn't long ago. I think we sort of have this tendency to depersonalize and dehumanize all of these sort of political events. But it's all of it seems very close to home, especially when you hear stories about that of Rodrigo Rojas. I don't know, what do you think about the sort of dehumanization we're taught to think about stuff like this?
Well, the reason I wanted to share this guy's stories, particularly on this on Midwestern Marxists, because this guy's not just a Chilean communist hero; he's an American communist hero. He grew up American. He grew up in American high school. He was taught photography by American professors, and again, he died doing, he helped the struggle, but in a very American way. As I said, this guy, a Chilean doesn't. In a protest, obviously we have journalists, right? But like you get a young kid who goes to a protest, he's not taking pictures, like there's other cultural aspects that instigate people to act a certain way. So I wanted that to be understood, that this isn't some isolated thing, and it wasn't just Chile that was hurt here. It was America. Sure, escaping Rojas himself. Just to share this anecdote. One time I was, on Twitter, you argue with people. I saw some guy saying that, like, it was a while ago. I don't remember the context, but he said, like, hey, if your country could coup and overthrow people, you would as well. It's like he says that like he somehow saw a benefit, like how he got richer from the coup. It's like, dude, you got it so backwards, and it's tragic. It's tragic how lost these ideas. Anti-imperialism was something that was commonly understood throughout the whole world. People understood that, like, my country spending money to go bomb Gaza is coming at the expense of me having better healthcare, or me, keeping our roads maintained, or our schools, having good infrastructure and whatnot. That's
that
something that we need to
for decades.
So go ahead, come again.
I was saying that understanding went away for decades.
No, it didn't go away. It was systematically crushed and destroyed.
That's a very good point. For me, I see these days it's coming back though, and we're in this weird embryonic phase where a bunch of people have crazy ideas that about what the real problem is, but everybody everywhere across this country is now recognizing that all of these wars are at our expense rather than somehow benefiting us. And I think that's a huge step to get back to that place.
And that's the fundamental task of the communist ways, to rekindle those embers they're still there, and they're still, if you blow on them, they'll turn into a roaring fire. But you need to, and then here we get to where we sound like a broken record. Like the left has failed for the past 30 years not because of any other reason, but that it refuses to speak to the masses, right? It refuses to go to people and talk in a language that they understand. You go, I lived in the States. When people tell me, like, oh, if you were a communist in Trump country, they'd kill you. It's like, one of my father's best friends, who he helped us out so much. He would invite us to barbecues and whatnot. He was like, a hillbilly from Louisiana who, worked hard enough to get a college education and went to go to UCSB. But, he had his way of being. And he was one of the nicest persons who I ever met in the States, much nicer than any, liberal who, uses the right pronouns and, refers to, he who knows about Allende and, like, it's like, oh, you're a communist and that's cool. Like, if I go and tell him, like, hey, I'm a communist, he'd be like, what do you mean, man? Like, what are you talking about? He'd be like, because he has a preconception, and that's fine. But if I go in and tell him, hey, man, what do you think about Iraq? Be like, one of the worst mistakes my country ever made. So, there's something there. There's a commonality. So you need to know how to work that. You need to know how to work that instead of, you're just being like, oh, you're an anti-communist and fuck you. It's like, well, what kind of, you're not doing politics. You're doing what you call it, a friends club.
It's like Carlos tells a story of when he first moved to the Midwest for college, right, from Florida. Growing up, he was only around other Cubans, really, and everyone was telling him, you got to be really, really careful when you get to the Midwest. It's not like here. It's not like Miami. Them good old boys are going to be after you. Right? They're going to hate you because your last name ends in a vowel, right? They're going to hate you because your skin's a little browner than theirs. And he gets here and he's like, these people were crazy. These are the nicest people I've ever met in my life. I am a communist in Trump country, right? People don't care. If you're a real, genuine person who's actually a good person, nobody cares. And I think that's what the leftists, that you're right, did fail for the last decades, right? At least 3 decades. That's what they don't seem to get, that being a good person matters. It's funny because some of the most heinous things are said by the extreme right. There's a resurgent neo-Nazi movement in our country right now. But who has gone out of their way to just be disgustingly anti-human in their attacks on us is leftists, right? It seems as if there's no moral low they won't stoop to prove how morally pure they are. It's this really weird dialectic that the purer they believe they are, the lower they must sink in order to prove that. Right? I don't know. I don't want to get off on a big thing. I do want to say, though, that I really like this sort of format that we're doing right now of just telling a story of a person. I think it's really good to sort of rehumanize history, telling it in stories like that. And I think this is a really, really good beginning place to start something new. So I don't know if you have time or you'd want to do it, but I'd love to have you back to just tell another story, and we can have like a sort of story-hour series.
I got a lot of stories that maybe it'd be good to get someone else from another country, because otherwise it'd be a little samey. But I can help you.
I'm not saying it would only be you. I'm saying like another time.
No,
I'm planning on.
I'm just throwing that out.
Yes.
But no, I would love to. We can coordinate later. Though, if I may, I want to say one more thing. I guess since we're wrapping up.
Get 1 second before you do.
Go for it.
Daniel with the 5. Thank you so much, brother. He says, beautiful story. Comrade Red, have you seen the recent film about Rodrigo Rojas? And if so, what did you think about it?
I had no idea there was a film.
I didn't either. I know what I'm doing with the wife tonight.
Let me just full disclosure. I learned about this kid about a week ago. I was just on the bus on my way to university, listening to a folk band that there was an album I'd never touched, so I was like, hey, let's throw this on, and a song comes on. It's a beautiful song, and it talks about this kid Rodrigo Rojas. It doesn't go into a lot of detail about his life, but it makes it pretty clear that he was killed during the dictatorship. So I'm like, all right, let me look this guy up, and I'm on the bus, and I start reading this kid's biography, and I'm like, struggling to not break down crying in the fucking bus, because I'm like, dude, it was like reading my biography. Obviously, my father wasn't exiled, but like he went to the States, he grew up there, he came back when he was 19. It was a weird experience.
Yeah, I bet. By the way, real quick, Popers, another membership from Popers. Thank you so much. By the way, everybody, this is a completely people-funded institute. Every last dime in our budget comes from you guys. And we put every last dime of it back into the class struggle. So thank you all. If you ain't got it like that, that's fine. If you do, go to patreon.com/MidwesternMarks or send us a super chat or whatever you want to do. If you don't, we are, and I'm serious about this, we're suffering a very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Acute algorithmic suppression right now. It's really, really ramping up. So if you ain't got it like that, share and like the stream. I can't say that enough. That is immensely important. We count on you guys as being part of our institute to share it as wide as possible because we are throttled so hard. So every single one of you, share it with at least one person. Share it with your mom. Share it with your sister. Share it with your coworker. Share it with your cat. I don't care. Share it right now. Do it.
Particularly this story, I think, would be a pretty good entry point for someone who is unfamiliar. It's very personal, and it's anybody can understand it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I wrote down, I think Daniel sent the title of the film.
Yeah.
It's La Mirada Incendiada.
That means the burnt site.
Okay, cool. The burned site. Really?
Yeah.
Site?
No,
okay.
The site that's in like to see.
Right. Oh, okay. Burnt vision. Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
That's a better translation.
The site threw me because I think like website.
Yeah, that website.
I'm stupid.
I
I know what I'm doing with the wife after this though. For real, I'm gonna check this movie out.
I know. If you'd allow me, just one more thing to mention.
The floor is yours, brother. Go ahead.
Thank you. No, I want to have this somewhere, because I said on my Twitter, but my Twitter only goes so far. I want to just to be stated in a place where it'll reach a few more people. The notion of solidarity is very important. We just went through the story of a kid who gave it all to have solidarity with his country. But oftentimes, and particularly in this time with Palestine, there's a lot of words about having solidarity with Palestine and doing X or Y. And speaking of someone who lives in a country that is under the boot of American imperialism, there's a lot of people who go out and say, we have solidarity with this place and whatnot. It's like, to say it bluntly, I don't mean no disrespect to anybody who's doing their best intentions, but if your solidarity is just words, it's useless, And I mentioned this because as ACP has launched, maybe it will, maybe it won't. That's up for you guys to determine through hard work. ACP, at least to me, strikes as the first political entity from the radical left, or the communist movement, communism particularities in America, whatever you want to call it, that has taken a serious effort to reach the American masses, mobilize them, and get them somewhere useful. Every single party since the heyday of the American the Communist Party of the United States in the 30s and 40s has failed to do that. And the ACP has, at the very least, seriously taken that task. You can say a lot about Henkel. When he speaks, people listen. You can critique his appearance on Alex Jones or any other place. In my general secretary, when he gets invited to go on TV, he goes, and it doesn't matter where, right? He's gone on evangelical television. He's gone into shows where debate shows where the whole pitch is that they make fun of everybody there. He goes there, and he gets ridiculed, that he gets made fun of. They drag him online, and he does that because it's not about him, and it's not about how if he wants to go on there or not. He does it because a communist's job is to go out there and try to get communist policies, the communist politics to go forward, right? Henkel has done that more successful than any other American in a long time. Mm-hmm. So this is just an argument, perhaps, or a plea, perhaps even. Think a bit more deeply about what's going on, and consider the reason why ACP was founded. And look, criticize with your hands full, right? And if your hands aren't full, do a self-criticism before looking elsewhere to blame.
I think that's really, really well said, brother. It strikes me as a little chauvinistic when all of these, left groups that have failed speak for, organizations of country on like as if they're speaking on behalf of the people of your country, right? When they're the sort of the reason that people in your country gave up hope on the U.S. for so long. And I don't know, we're wrong sometimes, right? I'm wrong sometimes. I'm a human being.
You're not going to get it right every time. That's just not possible.
Right. But I'm trying. And I'm trying my hardest. And I think that's what matters. I don't think we can say the rest of them are. I just don't. I think it's about words, right? Like sending hopes and prayers doesn't matter. What matters is organizing the people of this country to replace the government that is throttling all these other countries in the world, because there ain't no other way to get it done. And if we look at them as if they're backwards rednecks, then they're correct to hate us.
To distill, to say in a few words what it took me a while to say briefly. If your solidarity is your solidarity, as in you as an individual, it's useless. Mm-hmm. I need, what Chile needs, what Palestine needs more than anything, is the solidarity of a whole group of people, of the masses. You need to be able to mobilize thousands, if not millions of people to halt the genocide. That is what it takes. And if you can't do that, you need to stop looking at other people as to because other people are not stopping you from doing that work. You need to start looking inwards and be like, what can I do so that, we can stop this thing? Or, what can I do so that the next time that there's a crisis of this magnitude, we can stop it? That's what Lenin did. That's what Mao did. That's what Castro did. And that's what we need to do.
I think that's a great place to end it, brother. For anyone looking for information, where can they find you? Where can they find your party?
I'm the Red Chilean. It's on Twitter. Red is in Spanish because I've been banned too many times. It's spelled ROJO_Chilean. That's me. But more importantly, you can find my party's show on Press TV. It's in Spanish, so if you speak Spanish, check out Negro y Blanco con Eduardo Ortiz. That is on Hispan TV, Negro y Blanco con Eduardo Ortiz. That show is fantastic. If you're trying to get into to understand the geopolitics of today, the world news, that is a level of detail and vision that you won't see in many other places, at least distilled to that brief. In English, you can find some podcasts that are like 3 hours long and you'll get it. but it's a little painful to go through. There you get it distilled down to 30 minutes.
Awesome.
I was going to jab at Midwestern Marks. That was to name them. I listen to the Duran, the Gray Zone, Scott Ritter. I listen to them every day, but they're a little verbose sometimes.
Yeah, they definitely can be. Real quick before we go, thank you so much, brother. Respect to Noah for humbly acknowledging that we are all wrong sometimes. Can both hosts share an example of their own journeys? Well, that's what we
started with it.
Yeah, that's what we started with for Fernando. Just rewind. And if you're looking for my story, it's kind of all over the internet. I'm nothing special. I'm just a redneck that wants to help. That's it, brother.
Yeah,
all right, we're gonna go out to
stated, we were both sadly anarchists at one point in our life.
I tried to pretend I wasn't.
I don't know.
I believe I told my dad I was going to smash the state with music, and he went, "Uh-huh."
It's too bad. If it was only so simple.
Right. All right, brother. Thank you so much for coming out. This has been a blast. I'm so glad we finally got to do this. And I can't wait to have you on again sometime in the future for another story. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Stand up, all victims of oppression, for the tyrants fear your might. Don't cling so hard to your possessions, for you have nothing if you have no right. Let racist ignorance be ended, for respect makes the empires fall. Freedom is merely privilege extended, unless enjoyed by one and all. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The Internationale unites the world in song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. Let no one build walls to divide us, walls of hatred nor walls of stone. Come greet the dawn and stand beside us. We'll live together or we'll die alone. In our world poisoned by exploitation, those who have taken, now they must give. And end the vanity of nations, we've but one earth on which to live. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The Internationale unites the world in the song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. And so begins the final drama, in the streets and in the fields. We stand unbowed before their armor, we defy their guns and shields. When we fight, provoked by their aggression, let us be inspired by life and love. For though they offer us concessions, change will not come from above. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The Internationale